Sometimes people ask me to say the shir in honor of somebody, or more often in memory of somebody. And more often than not, I don't necessarily know who the person is. But today I'm going to say the shir in memory of somebody whose name is Chaim Shlomo ben David. Olav Shalom. He was a very, very close friend of mine. He was actually one of the Eidim by my wedding. So what I can say is that he somehow was, when we were in yeshiva, he was the biggest Hamad Chacham there. He was the most capable. And he also ended up becoming a very wealthy person and became the biggest Baal Chesed of anybody who was there. It's very rare that somebody could be both an incredible Talmid Chacham. I'm saying again, he was absolutely incredible. And he retired early, and that's all he did was give money away and investments and learn. And he got sick a couple of years ago, and he was nifter this week. And I'm absolutely devastated. As I said, he was a very, very close friend, and it's almost like silly to say we're going to learn in his memory, and his accomplishments were really so great. But as I said, he was a very close friend, and I have stories I can tell, not now, but we have some good stories. Anyway, let us begin. Vayetzeh Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelach Harana. So Yaakov leaves Beersheva. This is actually the second time that he left. At the end of last week's parsha, he left as well. So just, again, you can read it. It's very strange. So if we want to continue our theme of dysfunctional families, so his mother and his father, who seem to have never agreed about anything, they both told him to go, but for very different reasons. So the fact that he goes, that the Torah recounts as leaving twice, so you can say once was he left because his mother told him, once he left because his father told him to go. But either way, he's on his way. So now, all that I know at this point in terms of geography is that he left Beersheva. That's what I know. The second thing I know is the direction that he's going in, that he's on the way to Haran. More than that, I can't say. In the next pasuk, we're going to have one word multiple times, and this word will be multiple times, even more times in the section. Vayifka bamakom. So what do you now note? It doesn't tell you what the place is. Vayifka bamakom, which, by the way, incidentally, we're told that this is how we know about Yaakov davening at night. Vayifka bamakom v'yalan sham. Where's Sham? Bamakom. What's the makom? So you only have one good answer to that as of this point. And what's that? Between Beersheva and between Haran. That's all that you know. And by the way, and all of that's assuming he doesn't get lost. Sometimes you get lost, and you're between Beersheva and Haran, but not necessarily in a straight line anymore. V'yifka b'makom v'yalan Sham. Kiva hashemesh, because the sun set. So essentially, sun goes down. You think you're traveling. You think you're on the way. And that's it. You got to stop. V'yikach mavnei hamakom. So now you have that other emphasis. He took from the rocks from that place. V'yasami rashatav. V'yishkav b'makom, and he lays down on that place. So it's almost like it's really trying hard not to tell you what that place is. It's that place. So where was it? Hamakom. V'yichalom, and then he dreams. Dreams are, of course, interesting. Because one of the things about dreams is, and again, now I don't know to talk about my dreams, which I more often than not don't remember when I wake up. I'm not one of these people that, some people remember their dreams, but more often than not I don't. I also strongly suspect the dreams we remember are those like 14 seconds before you wake up, which seems like it was 3 hours worth of dreams, but it was all within a couple of seconds. And the truth is nothing makes sense because everything is all convoluted and the logical flow doesn't make, but there's what I'm going to call a dreamlike quality. And there are a number of times in the Torah that we have episodes that have dreamlike qualities to them. And things, and the reason I'm saying that is because just you have a hard time understanding exactly what's taking place. And certain elements of what we're going to learn today are just going to completely continue this dreamlike quality to what we're learning. And, if you want one scene like this, is another traveling by a malon. Which one? When Moshe travels by the malon, and then something happens, and there are angels there as well, and there's an attack, and somebody's threatened, and someone almost dies, but we're not. And as the reader, by the way, we have no idea who it is or why it is, and so on. But that's a dreamlike quality. When Yaakov is attacked along the way in the middle of the night, an angel, by the way, it never says angel there. and he's attacked along the way. So again, there's something that he said to him, there is some also lack of clarity, which also seems to be makes sense within a dreamlike sequence. We could point at others as well, but I'm just noting that sometimes you have sections of the Torah that are hard for us to understand, and part of the reason is because there is something dreamlike. Now, for Yaakov, the dream is going to be amazing because, for if nothing else, that God appears in the dream. So it's at this point that, we also could have said, again, we're not going to read it this moment. I just want to think it through a little bit. I mean, somebody could have had a dream and God appears in the dream and they wake up and they realize, oh, that was just a dream. But with Yaakov, that's not what happens. Yaakov wakes up and he says, wow, this place is, and now we can continue, that Yaakov realizes that something dramatic took place. The very fact that God is speaking to Yaakov, we have no evidence that God ever spoke to him before. And we also could note that Yaakov perhaps had some questionable behavior. Again, we can question. I don't know if is that right or not our right to question, but there may have been some questionable behavior which leads up to this particular moment, and now nonetheless God is speaking to him. So that itself is incredible. So let's read. As of this point, what do we know? We know that Yaakov leaves and he's on the way, and we know that he's by this place, but we don't know what this place is. And we're told by Chazal that he prays, which is also interesting, right? Again, Vayifkam Makom, I would not have known. You get struck by what is it? Says no. Chazal prove that this, or prove they bring evidence that this is in fact prayer. So if Yaakov prays before he goes to sleep, and then there is a divine response, that's also really interesting because that then tells you something about the level that God appreciates that Yaakov is in. I don't want you to look down. I don't want you to look. I want you just to use your minds. We're told about angels that are going up and down this ladder, or by the way, it could be up and down, or it could be down and up. So what without looking, what's the direction that the angels go? So now there's two ways of doing this. One way is thinking logically, and the other way is knowing what it says. So if I were to think logically, then I would say, well, the angels must have their origin up in heaven, because in heaven you have your angel factory. You have a mun factory, you got an angel factory, I'm sure you got some other factories up there. So therefore you have your angel factory, and then you get this brand new angel, and the angel comes down, checks out what's going on, whatever, or does its mission and then goes back up. So what's interesting about this particular dream, and let's now start, v'chalom, and he dreams. So right away with that, this is a dream. V'hinei sulam mutzav artza v'rosho magia hashamayma. You have something whose foundation is on the ground and its head reaches up into heavens. By the way, the only other time we were given a description which is similar to this is by the tower by Bavel, which also is Rosho Magia Shemaima, which was not necessarily seen as a very positive thing, and the God comes and frustrates that. So over here, we're having something similar, and the other thing is that Sulam is a hapix. I know, you said, I know, exactly. It is a word which only appears one time in all of Tanakh. So therefore, all of you who think that you know what it means, the only way to know what it means is based upon this particular text. And I'll say it again, if the only other time we had something going up to heaven is a tower, maybe this is the tower. The only other thing is you'll say that, but there are angels who are going up. And in Mishnaic Hebrew, in Talmudic Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, a sulam is a ladder, right? Which, based upon the age of almost everyone here, it's the kind of thing none of us are supposed to go up and down, right? I saw an article about like the worst things for the health of a person over, you can pick whatever age you want, I think it was over 60, and all the things on the list were things where you can hurt yourself. Like none of these, none of it was, it was all like bad. The number one thing was going up a ladder. Like you're not supposed to go up ladders. When you reach a certain age, that's what you get other people to do for you. So over here, excuse me? And the other person is not your spouse, by the way. Vayechalom v'hinei sulam utzavar tzavrosh megia shamayim v'hinei malachei elokim. And there's always going to be tension. We're not going to get into malachei if it's yud kei vav kei, malachei elokim, and it's worthwhile tracking down all of those. That I'm just saying that is a direction we could have gone, but not for now. V'hinei malachei elokim olim v'yordim bo. So much for my angel factory. And if anything, and by the way, if you need just a short Dvar Torah for today, because you'll lose me right after I say this part, I could then say that, oh, this is interesting because it kind of matches a mission in Pirkei Avot, that every single time a person does a good deed, it creates an angel. So therefore, the angels going up and going down actually really would be a judgment on Yaakov. All of Yaakov's deeds are going up and then getting judgment and coming down. And I'll ask again, okay, how's Yaakov doing at this point? Which means there are some things that he may have to explain. Although I could say, if I were there to justify Yaakov, I would essentially say that Yaakov was put in an impossible position whereby his mother is telling him one thing and his father is telling him something else. And right there you have a problem, and maybe you would say that you listen to, but I don't care who you would say, but his mother is telling him prophetically prophecies that she heard. And therefore to listen to a prophet is going to win out, and therefore I can justify every single thing that Yaakov does because we're supposed to listen to our prophets. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of the story. But nonetheless, the angels are going up and then going down. Unless you like Rav Nachman from Breslov, whose Torah, by the way, if you never understood it that much, it's always very visual. So he sees angels going up and going down, this kind of kinetic movement, which he saw Hasidim dancing. Hasidim dancing, and the dancing going up and going down as somebody's dancing. He goes, oh, those are angels going up and down. So again, now you have a second thing to think about. And let's continue. V'nei Hashem nitzav alav. The alav is unclear, and God is God atop of Yaakov, right there on top of him, which is very, very daunting. Or is it that God is on top of the ladder, which is only semi-daunting, and we don't know exactly how large or tall or how many rungs in the ladder. By the way, that is discussed by various mystical sources, how many rungs are in that ladder. And it says that God is there. Vayomer ani Hashem, just in case he doesn't know who it is. Ani Hashem Elokei Avraham Avicha v'Elokei Yitzchak. By the way, the calling over here, again, every time we have lack of symmetry is interesting. It could have said Elokei, if it would have said Avicha, it should have said, if I would rewrite or edit this, you can now agree or disagree with me on this, I would have written Elokei Avraham v'Elokei Yitzchak Avicha. So to say Elokei Avram Avicha v'Elokei Yitzchak is what's a little awkward over here. And by the way, that awkwardness is of course something which needs to be explained. So maybe one of the things that we have to have in the back of our minds that we have to circle back to is going to be why the emphasis on Avraham right here. Good? Good? Good. The land in which you're lying on, I'm going to give to you and give to your descendants, which essentially confirms the blessing that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov right before he left. He was given Birchat Avraham, and he was told that he's going to receive Eretz Yisrael. God confirms that. The other thing, parenthetically, which I've mentioned many times over the years, is what he does not confirm is the other bracha that he took surreptitiously. There's no confirmation. Oh yeah, I'm giving you all of that. And I think that silence bothers Yaakov a great deal, or at least he realizes what's going on. And then, of course, you can question yourselves, if that's the case, then what was the whole purpose of all this? The purpose was not for Yaakov to receive the blessing surreptitiously. Rather, this whole thing was to ensure that Esav does not receive this, because bad people with lots of power is very dangerous. And therefore, the whole thing was not about Yaakov getting it, it was about Esav not getting it. Okay, so that's also something to think about. But when God says over here, the land which I'm going, so by the way, notice over here we switched from our favorite word. What was that word? Makom. It switched from makom to haaretz. So now I can ask you, so what does haaretz mean? And of course you're going to tell me haaretz means something which is very, very broad. And the exact borders of which we can debate and we can discuss, and depends on how Zionist or how, I guess, how right-wing you are. I love the editorial in the Jerusalem Post that described Haaretz as a left-leaning newspaper. Left-leaning newspaper. Okay. Oh, no, that's it, left-leaning. I can now just imagine certain politicians who they would call right-leaning, but I don't think they do that. Okay. So again, children bursting out all over and so on. And I'm with you, right? I got you back, which by the way is very interesting, because if I do go back to the end of last week's parsha, and I think about the dual missions, the mission that he was sent on by Yitzchak was to find a wife and have children. The mission he was sent by Rivka was one of, you need to be protected, you need to be taken care of, and this place is dangerous, so you need to go, and I'll call for you when it's time to come back. And which of course is mysterious because we have no evidence that she ever called for him. And she says, oh, when your brother calms down in a couple of days, and we don't know how many years that was, or if he ever calmed down, but essentially she was concerned about his welfare. So till now, God was reiterating the blessing that Yitzchak gave, again, the last blessing, the blessing that he knew when he knew it was Yaakov. But now, in a certain sense, God is going into mother mode, and he's being protective, and he's actually reiterating kind of, you hear my kind of, but that's what it's reminiscent of. He's reiterating what Rivka had said, that I'm going to be taking care, essentially she's taking care of you, and I'll when it's safe, then you're going to come back. And that's really what God is saying over here. So who had previously said, I'm going to bring you back? It was Rivka said, I'll bring you back. So now God is actually stepping into Rivka's shoes, which I think is real interesting. Yes? I'm not going to abandon you until everything is fulfilled. Vayikatz Yaakov. I love Vayikatz. What is Vayikatz? It's like this suddenly wakes up. It's like the middle of the night. He suddenly wakes up. Mishnato, from his slumber. Vayomer, Achen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. Now, at first we'll notice that we just now doubled back, and now we have the word makom again. So God is in this place. So is that a question, or what does that mean? V'anochi lo yadati, and I did not know that. I know people who try to play v'anochi lo yadati. He didn't know the Ten Commandments. You don't know. No, that's not what it means. It means that Yaakov is saying, and we're going to start looking at some commentaries on this. I mean, this is going to be one part of our problem, but I just want to read a little bit more first. So again, this bothers me. God, achen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh, v'anochi lo yadati. V'yira, and he was suddenly filled with awe, or you want to say fright, I'm fine with that as well. Again, my suspicion is there's certain words in Hebrew that are very difficult to translate into English, and v'yira doesn't mean fear, it means awe, but awe is not always used in English effectively. V'yomar, and he said, Man nora hamakom hazeh. So again, I don't want to turn Yaakov into a valley girl and say, how awesome is this place? Because that's not really what it means over here, but it is what it means. But it means it in a real sense, that this is just full of awe over here. Ein zeki im Beit Elokim, this is the Beit Elokim, v'zeh shara shamayim. Now, what in the world he means by all of this, and Beit Elokim and shara shamayim, if we were to think about that, most likely our first thought, again, I'm speaking in the plural here, most likely our first thought would be that somehow this reflects that the ladder itself, why it's mutzav artzav rosho shamayim, which means he's just now talking about what's on the ground and what's on the heaven. So therefore, what's on the ground is Beit Elokim, and what's in the heaven is going to be this Shar HaShamayim. So that sounds more or less what he's saying. Actually, if now you think a little bit further with Chazal saying that Vayifka b'makom, he prayed in this place, or prayed in this place, this is a Beit Elokim, because this is a place that he just now prayed. But of course, part of what's confounding us, what exactly does Beit Elokim mean? And somebody's going to now tell me it means the house of God. Thank you very much. But I still want to know what a Beit Elokim means as Yaakov is using it. And maybe yes, maybe no, we learn a little bit more about it as we continue when it says Vayishkem Yaakov b'boker. So now here, as opposed to being in the middle of the night, waking up from the dream, and again, sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night, there's disorientation. Sometimes you can wake up in the middle of the night and have absolute total clarity because of that communication that just now took place. And he wakes up in the morning, so I can assume that this is going to be a little bit clearer, level-headed, more of this earth type of experience. Again, that's Avnei HaMakom. And he makes for the monument. The Yitzhak Shemen Arosha, and he anoints it with oil, which sounds to be some kind of religious gesture, and turning it into something. And of course, with Hanukkah coming, it gives somebody to say some kind of Dvar Torah about Hanukkah here along the way. But Yikra et Shem HaMakom, and now we have again the Makom is being used. What are we up to? Is number 5? Have you lost count already? I think it's number 5. At least previously when I counted, it was number 5. These things, they change. But Yikra et Shem HaMakom Ahu Beit El. Now, of course, we're thinking Beit El versus Beit Elokim, and El and Elokim, and how close is, the Bayit sounds pretty much the same, but what is Beit El? V'ulam Luz, Shema Ir L'Rishonah. But the name of the city originally was Luz. So what exactly did Yaakov just now do? Did he now call, when it says it's Shem HaMakom, so what is the Makom? What are we referring to? Or how narrow or how large, or again, simply what is Yaakov doing? And if it's clear to you, it's not as clear to me. And then Yaakov makes a vow, which is really for us a postscript. Vayidor Yaakov neder lemor imya Elokim imadi u'shmarani b'derech hazer shenochi olech v'natan li lechem l'chol beged l'vosh. Yaakov has abandoned hopes of the blessing for incredible wealth that he had surreptitiously taken from his father. And now he asks God, okay, just the minimum, clothing on my back and bread on my plate. If you just do this for me and you guard me, which is exactly what God just now said. And this is not, if you do this, it's saying that if this were to take place, v'shavti b'shalom abeit avi, and as you've assured that I'm going to come back to my father's house, and then I will be around here to serve you. I know I'm translating it in my own convenient way. Again, this is one of the Bnei HaMakom, which I have now, till this point, turned it into a monument, Beit Elokim, but somehow that will become a Beit Elokim. And again, I'm going to ask you, what in the world does Beit Elokim mean? And even among the meager amount which I'm now hoping that you take care of me and you give me, even that I will give 10% from what you, how you take of what you give me. One of the things that bothers me about the translation of Beit Elokim, again, for all of you, it may be much easier than it is for me, is, from what it seems to me at least, is that Yaakov never does build a Beit Elokim. So if Yaakov never does build what I thought was a Beit Elokim, and I suspect all of you think is a Beit Elohim, right? So what is it? You want to call it a shul? You want to call it a mishkan? You want to call it the Beit HaMikdash? Whatever you want to call it, I don't think Yaakov ever builds it. So if Yaakov never builds it, so then we have a problem. And again, midrashically, I can solve the problem with flair. Yes? That the Briach HaTichon, the central beam, which is in the Mishkan, if you follow the Medrash, Yaakov had sent it down. When they first went into exile, he brought the beam. So why did he send down the beam? Because Yaakov wanted to donate to the Mishkan, and therefore I can claim, and then Yaakov fulfilled his vow. I hope you don't like what I just now said. It's very good if you're still searching, how did Yaakov keep his word? Okay, Yaakov keeps his word because his children keep his word eventually. So again, there is something elegant about that, but it's all based upon a certain assumption. What's that assumption? When Yaakov says, I'm going to make a Beit Elokim, what does it mean? So if I imagine that he's going to build a house, then again, I'm not sure it's a house, because why is this place called, what's the place called? Beit El. So what exactly does Beit El mean? So what exactly does Beit Elokim mean? And again, at this point, I have a little bit of problem, just to completely confuse us, with no other purpose. And what I want to do is to double back to this issue of when Yaakov wakes up in the middle of the night and he says, okay, God is in this place I didn't know. I want to come back to that. I'm much more concerned about that. But nonetheless, if you take a look at source number 2, Perek Lamed Aleph, Yaakov is off, living in Lavan's house, and here he tells over that he had a dream. Now, this is not necessarily the same dream, but it's a continuation of the dream. And I think there's various continuations. And various continuations have angels. And I think also in the middle of the night, on the way back, when he wrestles with an angel, I think that's also. And even though the angel's not written in the Chumash that it was an angel, it is written in Tanakh that it's an angel. So that's something that you can look for next week. Where in Tanakh does it come back and talk about it and call it an angel? And I'm saying that with 100% confidence, that it is, which ultimately is the best commentary on Chumash, is Chumash, and the second best is Navi, and the Navi does come back and talk about an angel that Yaakov wrestled with. So let's get to Yaakov's dream 2.0. We're going to get to 3.0 eventually, not necessarily today. Vayomer Elai Malacha Elokim Bechalom Yaakov Vayomer Hineni. Vayomer Sonei Nechor Ei Kol Atudim Ha'olim Alatzon Akudim Nikudim Uvudim Ki Re'iti Et Asher Lavan Oselach. Which means essentially Yaakov now is admitting to Rachel and Leah that he had inside information on how to pull off his various akudim and ukudim uvrudim. It's also interesting that that's what he's now dreaming about. Now he's dreaming about money. Originally he was dreaming about angels, but now the angel that's talking about how he's going to make money from Lavan, or at least not how he loses. Anochi. So now listen to this description that the angel says. Anochi ha'el beit el. So as I said, I want you to become completely confused because that's what the angels did for this. But can we read a little more? Anochi ha'el beit el, which now you realize, I am the God, if you will. Maybe that's what it means. I am the God of Beit El. Asher mashachta shamat seva, where you put oil on the monument. Asher nadarta li sham neder, and you made a vow. So this is great. You know, people go up, have an aliyah by the Torah, they make a vow. By Yizko, people make a vow. So how often does God send an angel and say, where's the vow? What's going on? Where's the money? Show me the money. That's what God says. Show me the money. So, and then he continues. Ata, now. You like that? Now. Kum, say, get up and go. Min haaretz hazot, vishuv el eretz molodatecha, and go back to the place that you're born. I mean, the whole thing of Yaakov's journey over here with Lech Lecha in the background, because this is an inverse Lech Lecha, where, again, Avram has to pick up and go from the place that he's born and come to this new land. Yaakov has left the land that was promised to Avram. Remember, Avram Avicha, I think, is a really important background that we haven't explained yet. But over here, now you need to pick up and make that same trip with Avram. But of course, there's something inverse about it, because Avram left you have to go back to the place that you're born. But again, we have over here an angel saying, Ani, Anochi, Ha'el Beit El. Now, if that's clear, wonderful, in Perek Lamed Hey, when Yaakov goes back, Vayomer Elokim El Yaakov, right? We've moved down a little bit. Yaakov's already in the land, let's call it the land of Canaan at this point. Vayomer Elokim El Yaakov, Kum Alei Beit El, V'shev Sham, go back to Beit El. So this is not the first time that it seems to be that he's, well, even though the first time was go, what did he say the first time? See, that's what's confusing. I'm the God who's there that you made, and you made a vow, now go back, but where does he go? Min haaretz hazot, and go back to the place that you're born. So he didn't tell him, keep your vow, even though I hope you all realize that there's are we allowed to call God passive aggressive, or that's not nice? I should be careful. I should be careful. But that's what it sounds like. But now, once he's back in the land, God, okay, the passivity didn't really work very well. Let me be a little bit more aggressive, right? What's better than passive aggressive? Aggressive aggressive. Although we know God can always be more aggressive. But Yomer Elokim El Yaakov, Kum Alei Beit El V'shev Sham. Go back to Beit El and settle there. V'asei Sham Mizbeach Lekel Hanireh Elecha B'Vercha Mipnei Esav Achicha. And go back, essentially, what is God saying? Make a Mizbeach. What had he previously done? He made a Matzeva. What did he say I'm going to do with the Matzeva? I'm going to turn it into a Beit Elokim. What was our question? What in the world is Beit Elokim? What is God now telling him to do? Make a Mizbeach. Okay, good. Vayomi Yaakov el Beito, he says to his household, El kol asher imo hasirut Elohei anechar asher betochachem ve'tur chlichot tzimotchem. Get rid of any idolatry you may have. Again, they may have gotten some especially from Lavan. You know, the Zayda was an Ovid of Zara. What can you do? V'nakuma v'naleh Beit El, and let's go prepare ourselves, and we're going to go up to Beit El. V'seh sham mizbeach lekel ha'oneh oti b'yom tzarati v'imadi b'derech asher alachti. And again, all of this is the continuation of where we started in terms of the dream, or that makom. And he says, I have to go and build a mizbeach, which is really interesting because Yaakov's only focusing on a mizbeach. V'yavo Yaakov Luza. Why? When was the last time we saw Luza? Luz, where was that? Before he changed the name. So what should bother you now? Okay, so at least you give me both a question and an answer. I didn't ask you for an answer. I asked you for a question. Why? Listen, there's a union. There's a union. You can't just go give answers. You get okay. So, but good. I'm saying, but that's absolutely the direction I have to start thinking. But first, you have to know that there's a question. When we ended again, that first thing, it says that Yaakov calls the place Beit El V'Ulam Luz Shema Ir L'Rishona. Originally, the place was called Luz, so now it says that Yaakov is. So 1 second. So let's go back. Where does he go? What are we up to here? Right. Pasuk Vav V'Yavo Yaakov Luza Asher Be'eretz Canaan He Beit El. So now, okay, so maybe it's a question, maybe not. The name caught on, maybe not. Sounds like it did it. Hu V'Chol Ha'am Asher Ino. By the way, those of you keeping track, that is the first time that we're called an Am. This is the beginning of Am Yisrael. This verse is, yes, okay. It is in Perek Lamed Hey, Pasuk Vav, V'yavo Yaakov Luza Asher Be'eretz Canaan, He Beit El, Hu V'Chol Ha'am Asher Imo. He and all, again, can I use the word nation? Is that okay with you? Hu V'Chol Ha'am Asher Imo. So this is the first time that we find Am Yisrael, and they're coming over here. And by the way, it's also very interesting because these exact same people, I would say, not even more or less, these exact same people already left Lavan's house. These exact same people had a couple of experiences. But what's changed right now? They're joining together on a religious experience and they're about to go to Beit El and keep the vow that Yaakov made all this time ago. So it seems to be that, again, there's always this debate, what are we? Are we a religion? Are we a people? Are we something else? But I'm just pointing out the first time that Am is mentioned is as we have gotten thrown away all of our non-monotheistic things that we have. I would say tchotchkes, that's really what I wanted to say. Throw all of those away and prepared ourselves, changing the clothes and getting ready for a religious experience. So I also, again, want to note that there really is something interesting and transformative about what takes place by this place. We become Am Yisrael by this place. Should I say that again or stronger? We become Am Yisrael by this place. And that itself is really interesting. And maybe that's going to provide us with a little bit more information of something with Chazal into it without doing all the hard work that I just now did. I'll point out the Chazal soon, but let's just get a little bit closer over here. And they come, again, the whole Am, they come together. Pasuk Zayin, V'yinsham Mizbeach, V'yikra Lamakom, and he calls the place El Beit El. Which is really great. It went. Whose narrative did it take? It took the narrative of Rivka. It didn't take the narrative of Yitzchak. It could have said then that's God appeared to him as he was going looking on his way to find the bride, but that's not what it says. That's the God who appeared to him when he was running away from his brother, and that's also God. Part of what God says, I'm going to take care of you, and so on. As I already pointed out, that God absolutely along the way over here also, I'm not saying exclusively, but also identifies with Rivka's mission over here. But this turn of phrase, V'yikra lemakom el beit el, do you realize the problem is, how am I supposed to say that? How am I supposed to pronounce that? First of all, is it el or is it kel? Is it beit el or beit kel? All of that, I don't know what to do. Does lemakom el beit el, is that now the name of the place? But because before it was just beit el, did the name just get changed? Did it just get a little bit more? Or what even to do with that? We don't know. We'll read a little bit more. What does mitachat lebeit el mean? So I guess we'll leave that as well. And we're going to skip to Pasuk Yudalid. And by the way, right before Yudalid, Pasuk Yud, because they also said that Am Yisrael emerge over here. V'yikra lo Elokim shemcha Yaakov, lo yikra shemcha od Yaakov, ki im Yisrael yeh shemecha v'yikra et shmo Yisrael. So now I'm going to ask you again, when does Am Yisrael emerge? Am Yisrael emerges right over here in this section. Both the Am and the Yisrael, independently, we put them together, and now you realize, here we found, again, in case you were searching, I don't know if you were searching, well, so where did Am Yisrael come from? It comes from this section over here, and you realize something is significant. And again, I'm going to point out that there's going to be a religious happening taking place. V'yitzav Yaakov matzeva b'makom asher diber ito matzevet oven. V'yasech alav nesech v'yitzok aleh shamen. And once again, we have our matzeva, and we have our oil being poured on it. V'yikra Yaakov et shem hamakom asher diber ito sham Elokim Beit El. So now we have yet another name. We had Beit El and El Beit El or Kel Beit El, and now Elokim Beit El. So now, as I said, I just hope that you're all as confused as I am, because it's real easy until you start reading the psukim, and then you say, I don't know what's going on. V'yisumi Beit El, and even if we're told just now the name is Elokim Beit El, so then why now does it say V'yisumi Beit El, v'yu od kivrata aretz levo efrata, v'teled racha v'tikesh b'lidata, and that, of course, is where Yosef is born and when Rachel passes away. V'yisa Yisrael, notice, yes. V'yisa Yisrael, Yisrael travels. So as I said, now it's an Am, and now it's Israel. Right here is where the shift all becomes articulated. Vayisa Yisrael vayeta olam ala lemigdal eder. Migdal eder is really interesting. If you want to read something interesting, just look up Migdal eder in Wikipedia and find out all about the place, both the ancient and the modern. Migdal eder. It was the first place built in the Gush. Okay. Maybe. It's only if you look at the Targum Yonatan. And it also depends if you know where the place is. So continue. Vayavo Yaakov el Yitzchak aviv Mamre kirat arba hi Chevron asher Goshem Avram v'Yitzchak. And then we've come almost full circles, because when Yaakov goes back home, he doesn't go back to Beersheba, and Yitzchak has somehow moved, which maybe there has been some communication, but he knows that the place to find Yitzchak is going to be Beersheba. And now we've completed our journey, we've completed our story. Of course, along the way, we have Beit El, but we don't know exactly what to do with Beit El. And let's look at the Ramban first. The Ramban, which is in source number 4, V'yikra Yaakov et Shem HaMakom Beit El, Yikra'enu Kahn Pam Acher Pam. He names it time after time. That was our problem. Why does he keep naming it? Wasn't it already called Beit El? Lo dia ki davar emet v'nachon ki hu Beit Elokim. It's confirmation. It's for strengthening. No, Yaakov, meaning each time Yaakov gets there, no, this is Beit Elokim. This is Beit El. This is the place. Which means it's not that it needed to be recalled, but it's just this religious burst from the depths of Yaakov's being that he has to call this out again because it's what he's feeling at that moment. Visham hashchina tamid. And Yaakov's response is because of these 3 words. The Shechina is always there, which means whatever this place is, Yaakov's responding, the Shechina is there. V'chein inyan shem Beersheba, and you'll notice a similar thing, that Beersheba also gets named various times. So don't be troubled by it, because it's named by the time of Avram, the time Yitzchak gets named. Don't be troubled by that, because it's a similar phenomenon. In source number 5, the Radak, we call them El Beit El, right? Here is where we got the El added onto it. Kfar Karanu Beit El, already was Beit El, Vatahusif Alav El, and now we added a little bit onto it. Kamoshe Pirashnu Gabe El Elohei Yisrael, which of course will be part of our problem here. And Pasuk Tet Vav, he writes, V'yikra, that's the 3rd time, Amar Pam Shlishit, Asher Diber Eton Hashem Elokim, Lo Dia Ki Yetom Makom B'yichud Shabana Sham Beit Elohim. This place is very specific. Again, that's where he's going to build the Beit Elohim or Beit Elohim. And Umizbeach Umatzevot Karu Beit El Milvad Shekarab Yishana Shem Ha'ir Kula Beit El. Essentially, what he's playing with over here, if you didn't catch it, is we have a city. By the way, that's Luz or Beit El, but you also have the Mizbeach or the Matzeva. So essentially, we have the Matzeva, the Mizbeach, and the city. And are all those 3 the same place or not? Now, you have a city probably with city limits. You have a city probably with the homes or the houses inside. And it's not necessarily that where Yaakov is right now is that place. So he's saying over here is Lodia ketom makom biyichud shebanasham beit elokim umizbeach ma'atzvot kara beit el milvad shekara b'yishona shem ha'ir kula beit el. But by the way, what you're going to find now, I don't know how many of the Rishonim you want to go through. Many Rishonim are going to play games like this, and all of them are going to do it differently. Which some is, no, the city is Beit El, but the Mizbeach isn't. No, the Mizbeach is Beit El, but the city is Luz. No, the Luz is, and there's essentially all these moving parts. And whenever there's lots of moving parts, then you can nuance it any way that you want. And I'm going to say it again. If I had absolute complete clarity, I would have told you already. Again, I'm going to do this like somewhat quickly in source number 6. I think the Orach Chaim does the opposite. ואולי שהוסיף לקרות למקום סמוך לבית אל, שגם הוא יקרא בית אל. No, first the city was called Beit El, and now also the outer environs are called Beit El. Essentially, why are they doing this? Because there are different ways of solving the problem. Why does Yaakov keep calling this place Beit El? So the Ramban says because he's overwhelmed with emotion every single time. So he keeps calling it Beit El because he's overwhelmed. And the others are trying to find some kind of not a religious reason for it, they're trying to find some kind of logical reason for it. But by the way, maybe when it comes to religious emotion, logical issues don't necessarily mean all that much. I mean, the Ramban is beautiful. He keeps calling it because he keeps feeling it. Every time he feels it, it's like saying, going over to somebody you love and saying, calling them something which is a term of endearment because you feel it at that particular time. That's essentially what Ramban is saying, is that Yaakov Avinu is in love and he feels it and he says it and he expresses it, which is all wonderful. Of course, we have this problem about the building and what he was supposed to build, but leave it. I said something nice. Let's not ruin it. The Ketav Kabbalah, Ein Pirish Karata Makom El Beit El Chalila. Don't say he called it El Beit El, which of course is what others are going to say. So I'm saying not only do people disagree, everybody's attacking everybody else. What they say in source number 8, the Malbim, he says again, originally Vayetzeh Pam Rishona lo kara b'shem Beit El rak hamakom sheshachav alav shesham ra'at sulam. Only the specific place that the ladder was v'shem ha'ir neshar b'shem Luz, but the city was called Luz. By the way, that's not so convincing because the pasuk I think says the opposite. He calls the city Beit El, and it was originally called Luz. So I don't even know how he says this, but who am I to argue? What? Yeah, right. I don't know how he says this. And at the end he writes, "V'ra'asha yesh kedusha b'klal hamakom." I mean, originally he only sees the holiness in one place, but then he discerns the holiness all over, and he adds it. The Rashbam, as always, is reliable, and the Rashbam points out that he wasn't in the city originally. Where was he? He was on the road. And he stops in the road. So he writes, "Lafisha haya makom be'emtza drachim ve'ein sham ir." He was not in the city, so therefore, why are we discussing the city? Well, the Torah discussed the city. We're just going to mention the Gra, and the Gra is here also for you to break your heads later if you want to look at it. But the Gra is claiming they're 3 different places. And I don't know how he says that because it says go back to the place that I told you. So you can only say that there are 3 different places if God tells go back to the place that I told you, that he didn't really go back to the place, and then you're going to get back to that same issue again. The city, the Mizbeach, the Matseva, are they all identical, the same place? But look at the Gra. This is the Gra on Sefer Yoshua. You can look up the pasuk and Sefer Yoshua. V'yotzami Beit El Luza, Luz Yishakor Yaakov Beit El, V'yikor Yaakov l'Shlosham Makamot Beit El. He called 3 different places Beit El. Which, by the way, is also a great way of solving the problem. Why does he call him the same place, Beit El? What's the answer? It's not the same place, right? Rishona kara Beit El levad, v'asheni kara El Beit El, v'shishi kara Elohim Beit El. So why were there little nuances? So everyone else is trying to figure out what those little nuances are. And what does the Gra say? What? The young Israel, right? Exactly. 3 different shuls. Makes right? That good. You also have a Dvar Torah for Shabbos. Okay. Why did Yaakov build 3 different shuls? I mean, that's it. This is the makar of that joke. Is the Vilna Gaon noticed? I mean, you never thought the Vilna Gaon had a good sense of humor. What can I say? Okay, we should be a little careful. But as I said, you can try to work through the rest of what he says over here because I'm pointing out again, where do you find multiple solutions to a problem when you have a problem that is not so easily solved? So it's like everybody's shooting in every direction and getting to all kinds of solutions. We're doubling back now, and now we're going to the part which really troubled me. And I guess we don't have all that much time to deal with it, but the part which really troubled me was when Yaakov wakes up and says, Man Norah Makom Hazeh, right? Let's not quote like that. Let's see exactly what he says. He says, "Vayikatz Yaakov mishanto v'yomer achen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati." God is in this place and I didn't know. So what is this place? What doesn't he know? What's going on? Start with source 11, which is the Targum Yonatan, or Suda Yonatan, translated back into Hebrew. Yesh kavod shchina shel Hashem shori makom hazeh v'anochi lo yodea. That the Shechina is in this place. I didn't know it. He wakes up and he realizes the Shechina is there. The Ibn Ezra, who always has to be coy, not always. I mean, the Ramban could be coy, but when Ibn Ezra, he does this a lot. I keep saying that one time I'm gonna try to give a shir, and every single time he uses the word sod. But here he writes, "Atam b'vorshim tu makomot yiru sham nisim." There are places that miracles take place. It's almost as if the miracles are dependent on the place. I can't explain why this is. Kisod muflahu, because it's an incredible secret. The commentaries on this is taken from Al HaTorah, the translation, and then the footnotes. It is one way they understand this. Sod mufla, it's beyond human comprehension. I can't explain it because no one can understand this. And the other way to say it, no, it's a secret, but I do know the secret. So now it comes down, whenever the Ibn Ezra says it's a secret, if there is one rule by all of his secrets, is there a secret? It means that he knows the secret, or he knows that there's something mystical over here, but he doesn't necessarily know the secret. Rav Avram ben Harambam goes in a very similar direction, and there's something really interesting about the connection between the two of them. Let me first read what he says. Vayiketz Yaakov v'chulei. V'zeh sod dak. There's a secret here. V'zeh ki yaduhu ubarur ki hu yitaleh eino guf ve'ein lo yachas el makom. So essentially, he's dealing with the problem of corporality, which means God has no body on the one hand, and God is not limited to one space. God is transcendent. God is transcendent. How could it be that he says that God is in this place? Because God is right. God is here. God is there. God is truly everywhere. Right. So how in the world can he limit to God being right here? So he also says that there's a secret involved in this, and he writes further. He says, God nonetheless lets his glory somehow be felt in some places. Lo yavin ha'adam sod zeh, and a person can't understand that. Elamisha hu yitaleh megalelo k'moshe amar l'Moshe. Only if God reveals it. When God says l'Moshe l'Shalom b'makom ha'nevuah shal na'alecha, where God says to Moshe, "You're on holy ground. Take off your shoes." And by the way, that's real interesting because you all should have thought of that long ago, right? When I first talked about Yaakov wakes up, oh, this is a holy place. You should have originally started thinking, where else do we see holy places? Here, oh, yeah, there is another holy place. And what's that holy place? Hold on a second. It's the place that God reveals. That's the burning bush. And God reveals himself to Moshe and says, this is a holy place. And essentially what Rabbi ben Arama did, he's just connecting it. By the way, there are rumors, none of them substantiated, about interconnection between the Rambam and the Ibn Ezra. There is this ethical will, which is claimed the Rambam wrote. It's pretty much been disproven that it's total forgery. That the Rambam tells his son Avraham that when he studies Chumash, he should use the Ibn Ezra. Okay, I don't know if the Ibn Ezra's publisher paid for that false will. I mean, theoretically, it's good for business, but nonetheless, there are people who think this because there is such a document. It just happens to be that there are a number of forgeries. Again, we don't want to call it forgeries. We'll call them pseudepigraphic literature, which means essentially when somebody writes something and then assumes the name of somebody else in it, which most of us would call a forgery. But there is a literature of this. It's not what was, it's what could have been. It's not what could have been in somebody's mind, what should have been. But as I said, there's very, very, very little reason to believe that it's authentic. The other thing is that there's also this whole legend about the Ibn Ezra and the Rambam meeting. So a couple things about the Ibn Ezra, and it's going to help us as we say something about him and then move over to some of the other commentaries as much as time allows us. The Ibn Ezra was very, very poor. And because of his poverty, he traveled all over the place. He goes from Spain and he spends some time in Egypt, which I'll come back to in a second. And he ends up going to France and he goes to Provence and he goes to England and he goes back there. He's all over the place, more than anyone else. He's all over the place. And part of it is he's looking for Parnassa. So he's like one of the first rabbis, just traveling place to place to place, meeting all kinds of interesting people. So someone also wrote this story about when the Ibn Ezra meets the Rambam. Now, before we get any more, you want me to ruin it, tell you it's not true, or tell you why it's not true? What do you want? First of all, the ages of the two of them. Secondly, at the point when the Ibn Ezra does get to Egypt, the Rambam's not in Egypt yet. That's the main reason the story's not true. But anyway, they claim that Ibn Ezra gets to Egypt, which is true, and then he hears about the Rambam, which I don't know if it's true. And see, I don't know if the Rambam ever heard about the Ibn Ezra. I don't know that. I don't know if the Rambam ever heard about Rashi. I don't know if the Rambam ever, again, I don't know if he ever told his son to study him. So therefore, the fact that the Ibn Ezra and the Rambam ben Aram say something similar. But anyway, according to the story, he wants to see the Rambam, so he hears the Rambam makes rounds in the hospital. which is also very interesting. I don't know how many hospitals there really were at the time. So he claims that he's sick and he gets a bed in the hospital. And the Rambam comes and makes rounds and doesn't have time to speak to everybody. He just like writes a prescription for each person. So when he gets to the Ibn Ezra, he writes a prescription. Now the Ibn Ezra wasn't really sick, so now he has questions on the Rambam, like what was it that he could have written? What does he think is wrong with him if there's nothing wrong with him? So he asked, what did the Rambam write? So it says that nothing's wrong with him other than he needs a couple $100, which essentially the Rambam noticed that he's destitute and needs money, which is a very, very interesting and amusing story. The Ibn Ezra claims that Yaakov was destitute, and he claims that Yitzchak was destitute, and he claims that Asa, and this is like his theory about like this whole part of Bereshit is the lack of money is what motive. That's why Esav didn't care about the Bechorah. There's no money left in the family anyway. Double of nothing is still nothing. So what does it make a difference? And the Ibn Ezra may be guilty of a little projection over here that, Yaakov wandering around reminds him of himself wandering around and having no money. Let's get back over here. Of course, this idea of God and God's not having a body is something which is more in the Rambam Hilchot Tshuva. Someone wants to look at the Hilchot Tshuva Perek Gimel Pasuk, Halacha Zayin, and look at the Ravid over there, and there's a whole discussion. Rashi tells us, I never would have slept in such a place because it was holy. The Rashbam says in source 15 that Lo kama sheyiti savur keshechavti kanchu makom chol. I thought it was not a holy place, but it turns out that it's holy. And they all go in the similar direction. But for sure, I didn't realize that the Shekhinah is in this place. And we keep hearing the same kind of things. Rabbi Yochanan, the same thing. The Shekhinah is over here in this place, which brings us to source 18. Now, this is one of these things we learned as kids. And that is that this ladder, remember I told you we don't know where we are, but what we do know is someplace between Beersheba. And so this is the source that tells us the ladder was actually on an angle. Although there's not an agreement. There's like more than one way of saying it. So let's just look at 18, Midrash Rabbah. The Shekhinah is in that place. Now, of course, this is great, but we don't know what that place is. Even though he already left Beersheba, its feet is in Beersheba. And the angle takes it on top of the Beit HaMikdash. And you realize, of course, why that's great and maybe even why that's necessary. Yes? Do we realize why? Because if the Shekhinah is in this place, this is the theory of conservation of Shekhinah. Where is the Shekhinah? The Shekhinah is in the Beit HaMikdash. Yaakov is saying, no, God is in this place. Zeh Sha'ar HaShamayim. So the only place it could really be is the Beit HaMikdash. But there's one problem with that. What's the problem with that? He's in Luz. He's not there. So don't bother me with facts. You're wide awake and being logical. You don't see the ladder that he saw. So therefore, the ladder that he saw went right over the Beit HaMikdash, and that's what Yaakov is feeling. Of course, that's not so simple when you look at all these other times that he keeps coming back and calling it Beit El, because there's no ladder in those other places. Yes? Yes. There's a second voice over here. Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Simon, Hasulam is omeid b'Beit HaMikdash v'shu magia ad Beit El. No, it's a different angle. The foot of it is by the Beit HaMikdash, which, by the way, then works again, but the top of it is by Beit El. Either way, you're going to say it's all interesting. Essentially, are we more focused on the land, or are we more focused upon the heaven over here? And that's essentially what these two voices of the Midrash does. And he calls the place Beit El. Excellent. The Alshech, we're not going to get into, but the Alshech, he claims that it was Har HaMoriah. This is his solution. Why play? And he actually attacks Chazal. Why are they talking about a ladder which is on an angle? There's an easier solution. You know what his easier solution is? God picked up Har HaMoriah and moved it to Luz. Why he thinks that's an easier solution, I don't know. But again, now you realize how troubling this is. That no, this is where the Shekhinah is, because why is the Shekhinah in this place? And as I keep on saying, people have trouble with this. In source number 20, we have the pasuk that Rav Avram ben Arambam told us to think about, and that's where that's where Moshe was told to take off his shoes. And what place is that? That's Chorev. What's another name for Chorev? Sinai. And now you look at the Midrash in source 21, which is going to say something which is going to bother you, but get past it because it's really interesting. What does the Midrash say? It says V'nei sulam zeh hakevesh. That is the. By the way, it doesn't know it's a sulam. It thinks it is. What do you call that? When the ramp that goes up to the mizbeach. It says, "Oh, what's a sulam? It's a ramp. What happens on a ramp? People, right? You can go up and down on a ramp. By the way, just that. That's it. It doesn't believe it doesn't believe it's a ladder. It's a ramp. And what's going up? V'malchei Elokim. What does that mean? Sorry, did I skip a little bit? I did. Yeah, let's do that again. That's Mutzav Arza, Zeh Mizbeach. Mizbeach Adama Taseli. Interesting pasuk that is in Shmot Perakaf right after Seret HaDibrot. Keep that in mind, because where are we at the point when that's said? We're at the foot of Har Sinai. V'rosho Magia Shemaima Elu Korbanot Sherichanu Lel Shemayim. What goes up? The Korbanot go up into heaven. V'nei Malachei Elokim. What's a malach? Another word for malach. Don't tell me angel. Another word for malach is a shliach. Malchei Elokim Elu Kohanim Gdolim. What are they doing? Olim v'yordimbo. They're going up and down the ramp. So what did he just now do? Visually, the Medrash. What did he just now do? It turned it all into Beit HaMikdash. Maybe. Because the only thing which is missing here is the Beit HaMikdash. What's there instead? The Mizbeach is there. It goes, V'nei Hashem nitzav alav. God is there. V'nei Hashem nitzav alav Mizbeach. Rabbanan, the rabbis, on the other hand, go in a different direction. Patrin and Sinai. They say, no, all this is a description of Sinai. Remember, Sinai is also something where there's something taking place above and there are people which are down below. V'yechalom v'nei sulam ze Sinai. Now, why in the world of the Sulam Sinai? Again, remember, that was the other holy place that we learned about by Moshe. This is a holy place. So now we're going with our theory of conservation of holy places. So therefore, by the way, geographically, this is somewhat challenging, but I guess you can always move mountains. So, Vihine Sulam ze Sinai, Mutzav Arza, Vidatzu Bitachid Ahar. The same word is used, that they all gathered by the bottom of the mountain. V'rosha Mageh Shemayim, V'harbo Be'esh, Adleva Shemayim. So therefore, by Sinai, you have all these elements. Davar Acher, oh yeah, by the way, another thing. V'nei Sulam ze Sinai. Otiyot Dedain, who Otiyot Dedain. It points out, again, what some of you love, some of you hate. It says the Gematria is the same. Sinai and Sulam have the same numerical value, but it's not using that, again, realize it's not using that as proof. It's just, that's the clinching point after it already explained all of this, that this is a similar thing. Source 23, 24, and 25 are all going to tell us the same thing about different people. The first 22 is going to be about Yitzchak, and it's going to say, Melamed, it comes to teach you, She'ara lo Kadosh Baruch Hu Beit HaMikdash Banoi B'charev Banoi, that Yitzchak saw the Beit HaMikdash built, destroyed, and built again, and then it goes into Re'eh Reach B'ni, and you realize that's the whole chapter 27, when he's giving the bracha, he sees the Reach, it's the Reach of the Mizbeach, he sees the Beit HaMikdash built, destroyed, and built again. Source, that as I said, is 23. And source, that's 22. 23 is Davar Achman Lamashar Kadosh Baruch Hu Yaakov Beit HaMikdash Banoi V'charev Banoi. That when Yaakov sees the Sulam, he there sees the Beit HaMikdash built, destroyed, and built again. Which is why he wakes up and says, oh, Beit Elokim, which means that's the whole background. Source 24 is by Avram Avinu when he's standing by Har HaMoriah, by the Akedah, Melamed She'ara Kadosh Baruch Hu Beit HaMikdash Charev Banoi Banoi Shenemar Shem Makom Hu Hashem Yira'eh, and then goes and proves it, which means essentially all three of the Avot see the Beit HaMikdash. Source 25, which I think is important. Source 25 is Perek Yud Bet. Avram arrives in Eretz Yisrael. Where's the first place he gets to? He gets to Shechem. By the way, when Yaakov comes back to Eretz Yisrael, he's going to get to Shechem, which is not going to work out as well. And the second place that he gets to is going to be, look at source, right? Vayavor Avram ba'aretz ad makom Shechem, right? V'knani ba'aretz, v'yashem v'yira Hashem el Avram v'yom elazar chatein et haaretz hazot. We've heard that before, but this is really the first time we're hearing it. V'yishem mizbeach l'Hashem anirei lav v'yitak misham ahari mikadim l'Beit El. Oh, why didn't any of you say this to me a while ago? We've heard about Beit El before. Avram went to Beit El. You know what he did there? Vayeto alo. He pitched his tent. Beit El, miyam v'ayvin kedem yivin shem mizbeach l'Hashem v'yikra b'shem Hashem. And he called out to God in this place. And a second time, if that's not enough, in 26, when he comes back from Mitzrayim, right? And what is it? Bein Beit El Bein Ai. And what happens? So now you realize that Avram prays and Yaakov prays in the same place, which means that this is a holy place. Which means if he doesn't, again, I just want to say a real simple theory about all of this is that Yaakov has come to the same place that Avram's come. Remember, we had a problem at the beginning? Avram Avicha. There was some emphasis about Avram over here. It should be no mystery why there was an emphasis at Avraham. Because now what are we learning? That Yaakov is wandering along the way. The sun sets. He essentially says a prayer before. He wasn't planning to be there. And which place did God arrange that he's going to get to right at that moment of sunset? He gets to the place that Avram already has built a Mizbeach, and Avram already has prayed there. So now when I say that this is a holy place, and he realizes, oh, look at this, this is the place that prayers go into heaven. This is the place which is holy. This is the place that Am Yisrael, right? This is the place that Am Yisrael is going to become Am Yisrael and serve God. But now you realize this is the place that Avraham is actually following. Again, the footsteps is hard to say, but it's not so hard to say. Because when Yaakov leaves, he's going the opposite direction. When Yaakov comes back, that's the same direction that Avram had come. Avram stopped in Shechem, and then Avram stops by Beit El, and they stop by Beit El, and they pray, and this is where they become Am Yisrael, which means Beit El is this place which has this incredible power to it. I don't have to work so hard with anything else. I can simply say, wow, look at what happened over here. This is where Yaakov connects with Avraham, finds this holy place, sees all the spiritual potential over here. And as I said, there's somebody who has taken those steps before, which is always going to be easier for us. You know, sometimes we're going to travel in a certain way and do certain things, and then you found out, you know what? Your grandfather did the exact same thing. And then he gets this feeling, this feeling of connectedness, the feeling, oh, God is in this place. This is the place, this realization. So of course this place is Beit El, and he gets overwhelmed every time he comes back here. This, you know, in Boston today, you know, even modern Orthodox people, we're also emotional. In Maimonides, there's a shul where the Rav used to daven. In the front of the shul, there is a shtender, and in the shtender there is something covering it, you know, this thing made out of whatever, and it actually has the Rav's initials on it. Nobody uses it. It's the Rav shtender. The Rav shtender is still there. A couple of years ago, I spoke in a shul, and I'm looking at there's some things about this. This is a relatively new shul, and I'm looking at some of the things, and I'm trying to understand really old furniture, new shul, what's going on. They say, oh, this, and then I look at all the signs on the wall. It's from a different shul, like all the people who passed away, and so I guess we started there, we'll end there as well. And then it and I'm looking at it, and I asked the rabbi. He goes, oh no, there used to be a shul in Manhattan called Moriah, and they ended up selling out and whatever, and this is all the old furniture there. I said, Moriah? I said, that's where the Rav gave a shiur during that. His famous Tuesday night shiur, if you know about it. My father went there for some 40 years. I said, that's where he gave the shiur. He goes, yeah. And then he had, to introduce me, had brought a couple copies of some of my books, and he had them on the shtender. And I said, who's shtender? Oh, that was the Rav shtender in Moriah. Just like randomly sitting over there in the shul. And just that point, that my svarim that I'd written are sitting on the Rav shtender, to me was just this. Again, you could say it's irrational, you can say anything you want, but it's okay, because it's a sense of connectedness. Yaakov Avinu felt much stronger when he has this dream and he sees prayers going up into heaven. Of course prayers go up into heaven. You know why? Because the Zayd daven there. Because Avram Avinu daven there. And Avram Avinu called this Beit El. And I think, if you think about it, this may solve all the problems that we had along the way. Because he just ended up there. He didn't go there on purpose. And now he realizes which place this is. Have a good Shabbos.